Clap your hands if you are crazy, must say clap your hands.
Domino Thinking presents Natural Born Speakers with your host, Allison Donaghy. If you were born to talk and want to know how to build your career around it, then Natural Born Speakers is the show for you. Now grab your seat because this is the place to be. Now here is your host, Allison.
Hi there. How's everybody doing today? Thank you so much for tuning in. I just want to give a bit of a shout out to Your Ultimate Speech. Mark Stoiber was a guest on my show not that long ago. And if you are a speaker and you want some tips, definitely go back and listen to it. And he and I have been going through a speech writing process, and I'm going to be doing a documentary coming up next month. So you'll want to tune into that. It's going to be excellent. Lots and lots of good information. But today, this is our main event. Today, we have Kristin Gracie with us, and really excited. I met Kristin back earlier this year in New York and absolutely fell in love with her. So I'm so thrilled that she's going to be on this show. From the wisdom of her own journey as both a student and a teacher, she curates high-quality group experiences in the U.S. and abroad. And her events are designed with a focus on the value of authenticity, community, and adventure. She just had an event. I'm really excited. We're going to be talking about that. And she's going to tell us all about it. I heard it was a huge success. Super sad I didn't get to go. Her life has been defined by dreaming big, loving bigger, following her heart, and taking crazy leaps of faith. And one of her dreams, which I think is super cool, is to host Oprah's content on Tony Robbins' stage with a sprinkle of Ellen DeGeneres' humor and fun. I tell you, I am buying tickets for that. I'm going to be front row. Welcome, Kristin.
Thank you, Allison. I'm very happy to be here.
So happy to have you. I know it's a bit of a time change because you're back east, so I really appreciate you taking the time right over dinner to spend some time with me. So we're going to hang out for an hour.
My pleasure.
Super. So what I'd really love for you to do, because you have such an interesting story. I know when we went out for dinner when I was in New York and you talked about it a little bit, I was just fascinated with the choices that you made and the bravery in which you took control of your life. It's quite inspirational. So I'd love it if you could share that story here.
Thank you. Well, there's so many chapters of my story that I'll try to keep it brief, but
No, tell us the good stuff.
The good stuff. Okay.
Take your time.
Well, it started, I guess I would start in college. I had taken a year off, not really knowing what I wanted to do. And in that year, I sort of, worked and saw what life was about. And then I got excited to get back into school. I'm really big on education as a result of that. And I became a big nerd and did really well and was on this path of perfection, so to speak. I was being sought out by, the top accounting firms in the world. And, I was married young, actually. So by 25, I was married and with job offers from all the top 4 accounting firms and checking off those boxes. I call it the checklist life manifesto. And Superwoman. But the problem was I woke up in a life that just wasn't mine. And it sort of became one of those things of wishing and dreaming, laying awake at night in silence, not really knowing how to go about those dreams. And I always had this wild imagination for traveling. And I always loved meeting strangers and like I said, hosting Oprah's content on a stage and, with a little bit of humor and fun was always my dream, but I could never own it. I was always embarrassed. It's like one of those things like, well, who doesn't want to be Oprah, And we all feel so disconnected from those people, like they're some superhumans, but really they're just like us, we're all the same. So if they could get there, why can't we? So really my life has been a journey of being able to own that. And I did come to a place where I woke up in a life, like I said, with the perfect husband, the beautiful house, the great job and all of that stuff. And I was just so empty and disconnected from anything that was truly mine. And so I left the perfect life. And that was one of the first leaps of faith in that I wasn't leaving for anything known. It was all completely unknown. I just knew it wasn't where I needed to be. And so then I was working for Ernst & Young, which is a phenomenal company. And but, it's a grind. If anybody knows public accounting, you are a cubicle troll at your desk for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I basically said no to everything personal for 2 years. And I knew I was like slinking into a bad place within myself when I went to write. So I'm a writer. It's something that was a gift of mine since I could write, at 6 years old. And I went to write one weekend that I actually had off because that wasn't very often. And I couldn't even write. So I felt like my creative energy was just like slowly dying inside of me. And I knew then that it was time for me to start thinking about something else. But the pressure to, stay the course of, what everybody expects of you and where you should be, where you should be in life. And 26, 27 years old, I had a trajectory of this, really prestigious career. And again, another thing, you don't leave. This is the second time I was coming up against that place of feeling like this wasn't where I was meant to be, but the world is looking at you like, well, that's what you should be doing. And truthfully, I can't take too much credit for having any kind of bravery or balls to leave that. It was really a result of my sister had messaged me that she needed to go for a biopsy of her lung. And lo and behold, I pretty much dropped everything. And my company was phenomenal in facilitating that. But I found myself in the office of the oncologist with her receiving a terminal diagnosis. And so that is really like the real moment in time where I think everything that has unfolded in the past decade started. There was just this immediate sense of life is too short and time is really all that matters. So, so I had taken I had looked up how I could take a time out to take care of her and be there for her. And I looked into the Family Medical Leave Act. And of course, they held my job, but, it wasn't paid. So the how to do this becomes the big question. And the thing of it was that I actually took my leave of absence. I put in my notice for that without knowing how. I just figured this is what I want. This is what I need to do. Everything will just work out. And it was a true leaning into faith and just trusting that this is what I needed to do and the how would show up. And lo and behold, it did. 2 days after I gave my notice to my job, I reached out to a bunch of people that I knew, and there was a job I had actually back up 2 months before this. I was on a client down in, I live in New York, so downtown Manhattan, and they were a former client of mine when I was bartending in college. And I always kept in touch with them, and they always said, whenever you're, in Manhattan, come, let us know. We'll take you to Delmonico's, which is, one of the most famous restaurants in the country. And so when I was there, it was sort of a joke in my suit that the manager had said, well, if you ever need a bartending job, come to us. And it was ha. And lo and behold, 2 months later, I remembered thinking like, wow, that place was pretty cool. I saw the girls making a lot of money, and, I reached out to them saying, hey, is there any chance? And my friend was like, don't get your hopes up. It's one of the most sought out bartending jobs that you can get in Manhattan. And so as it works, 2 days after I made that call to him to see if there was an opportunity there, he said, you're never going to believe this, but one of their main bartenders just gave her 2 weeks notice. Go down. They're interested in talking to you. And it was one of those things that it gives me goosebumps to remember because, I had no idea how this was going to work, but, I just took that leap and there it was. Turned out to be one of the biggest game changers for me in that, actually for 7 years of me financing in and out of an entrepreneurial path, I was in and out of there 3 times. They became a family environment for me. So anyway, So that was really the start of it. This was back in 2008. And during that time off, I really wasn't a time off. I was taking care of my sister during the day, in and out of the hospital with chemo and radiation, and then at night bartending. But during that time, there was an immediacy of, what's important in life. And that, I couldn't, the idea as each day ticked away that I was expected to go back to my big job, the anxiety set in deeper and deeper. And I just knew, I didn't want to be a bartender forever, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew it wasn't that path. And so, fast forward 6 months later, and I'm due to return to my big job, and the economy literally blew up. That was the fall of 2008 when people were dropping like flies, and especially in, down on Wall Street, which is where I was bartending, and in finance in particular. And I decided right up into the last minute to say thanks, but no thanks. And in that time, it was actually I was very alone because, the outside world doesn't, no matter how much they believe in you or trust in you or respect you, those sorts of decisions are just not understood. They're deemed to be irrational. And so
it's a phase.
Yeah. What was that?
It's a phase.
Yeah, exactly. She lost her mind, all those things. And I had, and they thought it was a rash, most people thought it was a rash decision and irrational and all that stuff. And I said, actually, I've been laboring over this for months. I don't take this decision very lightly, but I just know this isn't where I belong. And so from there, it's just been an entrepreneurial journey. I've had, I started a company a few years later with my dad. It was a technology business that we built together, and then just in and out, and sort of through the process of elimination is how I sort of peeled back the layers of doubts and sort of discovering my purpose and what it really was. Thing is that, we think that purpose is something to create, but actually it's inborn. It's always there. We just bury it with layers of fear and doubt and insecurity that, we have to work through to get back to it. But so I spent about 5 or 6 years, meditating and exploring and just getting back to that inner voice and trusting in it and having the confidence to not only trust it and listen to it, but act on it. So I'm in the year of action right now, 2016. So that's sort of my nutshell. I mean, there's so many stories in between, from love life to travel.
I think it's always so interesting hearing other people's stories, because we look at people walking down the street and they seem either like all put together or something, and we make up these stories in our head about who they are. And I know when I first met you, that's not the story I would have attached to you. I don't know what the story was, but that's not that story. And I think that's the important part of sharing our process or our experiences or our stories with people, because it definitely brings us all just that much closer together.
Absolutely.
I know on your website, what did I read on it? It was on your homepage. I just lost it because I was scooting around on here. And I should probably say that it's KristinGracie.com where people can go to find you. But on your homepage, it says, wait while it's loading, it says, I believe the power of the individual lies in the strength of their community. And I think by sharing stories the way that you've just shared yours helps build that community around us. And yet we seem so afraid to tell people where we're at so much of the time. And then people say, oh, this is all of a sudden that you're making this choice, when in fact, this has been a really long process with you. Now,
Absolutely.
Did you think sharing this experience with the people in your life would have made it easier? Or is it something that you're not sure of, so you're not going to really talk about it?
Well, it's interesting because I can tell a stranger anything, but it's always that inner circle that is like, but it's interesting what you just said, and it's actually at the heart of everything that I believe in. And, as I've become a certified health coach, but I really identify myself as just, an intuitive transformation coach, or just somebody to listen and then sort of feed it back to you to have your aha moments. But in sort of understanding how I had those moments of moving up and elevating myself, it was truthfully in exactly what you just said. In hearing somebody else's story, it made it more accessible to my own being. And, I always say if one person can do it, then anybody can do it. There's nothing that separates us from any possibility of what's within human capacity. And so I love to share my stories now because of that. And I think that I've been tested in so many different ways to serve as evidence and I think my gift of writing is a vehicle for that. And why I would love to be on a stage, why I love to be on a stage, telling stories and sharing that is so that people can extract from it what they're meant to, what's meant to be delivered for them, because each story that we share, carries something different for somebody else, and I always say that when you share your stories, it gives others permission to surrender to that. It's like, we're all going through similar things, and we all have a story, and it's just when somebody steps out to tell theirs, it allows for others to do the same, and to feel like not alone and there's nothing wrong with their process. We're all going through similar things.
Yeah. And I think that certainly holds true. Like that's such a great way of looking at our contribution, because we do contribute with our stories, but we also contribute with following our dreams, and we contribute with speaking out when something is wrong and calling people out on things that we don't agree with. And then other people around us can then say, hey, yeah, I don't agree with that too. Or here's my story. And there's a level of bravery, I think, that comes with putting it out there and telling your story, even like with the story that you just told. I'm sure you're comfortable with it. You've told it a lot of times, but you're telling it on a new platform. And I think there's always that little element of needing to be brave to step up and say, yes, I'll be on your show. And yes, I'm going to talk about my stuff. And then you teach everybody else around you how they can be brave too. And they can get it through the force, if you're a fan of that, but you share that, and then that passes on and it grows, and you share it with more people and it passes on and it grows. So I think it's absolutely terrific when people like you are able to do that. So thank you.
Well, thank you for allowing me to have, a platform to share it. It's
well, it's a treat having you here. I like hanging out with you.
Ditto. I know we had a great time in New York when we were, chatting it up. I really enjoyed your energy, and that's also the power of community is, just showing up, just showing up to talk, and just showing up to an event, or just showing up. We imagine things to be a lot scarier than they actually are. Just like owning up to our truth. I was thinking about this recently, in reflection back to, why were my big dreams never supported? And, we tend to, look back at our parents and be like, well, you didn't do this, or you didn't do that, or you didn't even ask me. And I remember thinking back, my dad used to always ask me, I get the dreamer from my father. And he always said, if you had your druthers and you can paint a picture of your life, what would it look like? And I would sit there in silence and in fear of releasing that truth. As young as 16 years old, he would ask me that question. And in reality, in hindsight now, I was thinking about this week. I'm like, I wonder what would have happened had I just told him then, he probably would have nurtured it. And so we sit in fear of the reaction that we're likely not even going to get, and actually prohibiting we prevent others from being able to support it.
Right. And there's so many stories that we, like, as you say, that we tell ourselves about what the outcome's going to be, why we need to be quiet, why we can't do this, why we can't do that. And it becomes such a self-fulfilling prophecy, I guess, that we should stay quiet. We can't have our dreams. And then the whole system is set up to not allow us to have those dreams.
Absolutely. And, it's the thing is, like, I think we're in a day and age where everybody's sort of looking around and they're like, you know what? We're all sort of suffering in silence, like holding ourselves back from really going for those big things. And by big things, I mean, it doesn't mean that you have to be, like Oprah. I don't mean big. I just mean those big dreams that you have. And it could be that you're a stay-at-home mom with 2 kids. It doesn't, whatever your purpose is and whatever your dream is, that's yours. And there's
we need people to have dreams like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And
like everybody's dream contributes to the way it all turns out.
absolutely. And that's why, I say actually, one of my mission is that if we could cultivate the power of feminine energy, which is, at the core of that is intuition and honoring that, in both men and women, we could make a collective shift, where everybody would be connected to their purpose and their inborn wisdom. And from that place, we would see harmony out in the world, and that's a lot of what my mission is helping people just sort of get naked. And, I say that figuratively, but get naked with it, own
Or
it.
not.
And,
It's fine too.
or not. Yeah. I'm not opposed to that either. And if we had a world run by people that are connected to their purpose, we would be in a natural state, and things would flow and we'd be in balance. And so that's like at the core of all that I am out to achieve in this world, is connecting to that. But
Right.
yeah.
And I think that that's like a really great point. Like my whole thing is critical thinking. And so I think it definitely ties into when we actually can step into the stuff that we believe, then we can share that with other people. And then we can start questioning things from that perspective. Like we've lost the ability to question. We just blindly follow. We get in these tribes that we all have. And then we just don't get out of them long enough to understand what the whole picture is. So I think it's really great that you're working towards creating a world that's more like that.
Yeah. And, on that point, I say, if, for instance, when I'm struggling most is when I'm hung up in my head, and that's all of us actually. And, or like when I'm, this recent event that I did, I gave myself like basically 5 weeks to finish my website, curate a big event in New York City over 3 days, wasn't just a one-day thing, and then market and sell it in just 5 weeks. And, the biggest trips that I was getting was the admin stuff. And it was because it was hanging me up in my head. The second I would clear my head and operate from my heart, that critical thinking happens so much faster. And I think when you are operating out of your heart first, you can move it then to the head a lot quicker. And it's clearer and more effective and more productive and less doubtful.
Right. Well, I think, it's because that you're clearer on where you're coming from when you're in touch with what you want. And then you're more clear on what's out of alignment. So now you can speak to that. Exactly. And then if you're speaking to that, now you have to get critical about it in a constructive way, like in a critical thinking type way. And then you also come from a place of not trying to criticize, but in trying to make things better.
Yes.
And it becomes this great momentum towards better, whatever better looks like.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I'm like a 5-year-old in questioning. So I'm like, the insatiable curiosity of Kristin is, maddening sometimes, but yeah, I think it's great. I wish the world would be a little bit more, asking questions and not being afraid to go up against, the status quo.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I say go up against the status quo every chance you get.
That's my life, girl.
Yes, I love it. I love that about you. Now, I want to go back to something that you had said at the beginning, and you talked about how when you talked about Oprah content and how it's embarrassing to state that you want that. Do you have any advice for people on how to overcome that so that maybe they can get there faster or depending on their age later, but sooner rather than later, to start owning that? Like, how did you own it?
Well, truthfully, and this is where, you quoted the essence, and that's why that's front and center on my website about the power of community. You really need to surround yourself with people that are like you in a way. I don't mean everybody has to be the same, but that it was really, once I started to find people that were like-minded and spirited like me, that strength just fueled my fire because it validates that you're not alone and that you're not weird. And that, there's a possibility. And I think that just having the support of others, it also holds you accountable and it you have a sounding board. So when you're getting tripped up on something, there's somebody that you can go to, and it's like magic almost, So I do think the number one thing is community. And that's why it's important, to go to these events, live events. I mean, the online thing is obviously got a chokehold on us, but, and that's important too, but to actually interact with other people and to seek that out, to find a mentor, to find a community of people that are like you, it will unlock you in ways that you can't even imagine. And that's why, that's one of my, that's the, for the RW project is, one of two things that are most important is that connection. I also think, just listening to other people's stories and knowing they're just human, we're all just human, and whatever that is, that I always say, if you can imagine it, you can do it. Period. Yeah. You wouldn't be able to imagine something if you couldn't do it. And so, when you look at what people are doing out in the world, they're just humans doing it. So why not you? And I always, I've always kind of thought that way. It just took me time to get that confidence together, and sort of come through that. But yeah, I would really say it starts with the people that you surround yourself with.
And that's it is so true. And I think that's great, and people should pay attention to that. Write it down, put it on a sticky note, stick it on your wall. I don't care what you do, but I think that that's really, really great advice. When we went out for dinner in New York, and there was a table of us, how many were at that table? 10?
Yeah,
10,
at least,
12,
yeah. It was
and we were with Angela from the Author Incubator, and we all got talking about things that we wanted to do. And I know for me, I am now doing most of the things I talked about at that table. I'm writing a book with her right now. And, my movie, it's still in the back burner. I'm talking to more people about it. So maybe something's going to happen with my movie. And those things that came up as important, I think they took on a life inside of me because I was with other people and their comments were taking life inside of them.
Absolutely. It gave me goosebumps because And sitting at that table, I felt like my posture, I sat up taller. I felt strong. I felt the collective energy of all those 13 or 14 women all on a similar path. And just, it gives you strength. And the accountability part of it, I live by this. If it comes out of my mouth, I'm holding myself to that. Just out of pride alone, even if it's on that. But, I still remember, the intentions I put out that night, and I actually checked one of them off with this event that I just made happen a couple weeks ago.
So let's talk about that event, though, because it keeps coming up.
Yeah. So what I've created is the RW project, which stands for Renaissance Woman. And, like you said in your introduction, it's really, from the, accumulation of my own journey, things that I found, I couldn't find out there, things that I, wanted to help create in others, particularly women. And so what it is it's what I wanted to do is get women together, for, a 2 or 3 day weekend. And, it's about empowerment, but I'm a little bit, I have to just say this. I've had a reflection about the whole women's empowerment movement, and there's, a new group popping up every day. And what's different about mine is that, it's becoming almost divisive, this whole woman rah thing that's going on right now, that I want it to be more about being human, truthfully. But I think women connecting to other women is so important. And I've said over all of the things that I've been through in my life, one of the steady, constant things that really grounded me were my female friendships. And, of course I love my men, and I, desire to have.
Great.
I love my men.
Yes.
And I say my men.
Awesome. They're all
they're all mine. We don't, I believe actually we've gotten to a place where we don't honor men enough. So that's something that I'm getting to as well in the content that I create for these. But putting that aside, I think as women, we really need to, I've struggled with I've either had a love or a hate sort of thing going on with other women, and not hate coming from me, but hate towards me in some weird way. And I think it's rooted in insecurity. And so I really wanted to be a leader for walking my talk and creating, connections amongst women. And so obviously providing a transformation workshop where we talk about confidence and faith and sort of redefining what it is to be a woman of the 21st century. And I think we got off track, and we're a bit confused about what it means to be a woman. And
I think we are more than a bit confused. And I think,
yes,
because I think I think that that's really normal when we have a big pendulum shift, right? So we went from having no power to thinking we should have so much power.
Yes.
And then that pendulum, it's not really settling into a healthy space, I think, in a lot of the world. And I talk to people all the time about feminism and ask them to define it. And I am amazed by the number of people who toss that word around but have no idea what it means for them. And it's different for everybody. But until we're actually able to define it, then how can we honor men and how can we honor other women? Because we don't even know what our position is.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. And that's also the thing is like, let's start defining these things, let's start being clear, what feminine energy is. I focus on feminine energy. Which is not female. It's, men have feminine energy as well. Although feminine energy is our dominant essence. But we need to start understanding these things. And I say this because, listen, the reason why I'm so passionate about it is because the impact it had on my life. Once I started to realize I was operating from a masculine standpoint, actually, I'm frequently referenced as sexy, and it used to make me uncomfortable even saying that out loud. But to find out that I was operating from a more masculine place was like almost repulsive to me. I was like, what does that even mean? And then when I started to learn what feminine and masculine is, I'm like, wow, and people just don't it's true. We don't even understand it.
No, we don't. And then we have all these groups popping up that don't even understand it. So then they're just spewing more shit.
Oh, I know.
Confusing the issue even more. And now these people, because they're in these groups, think that they actually know something, but they don't know anything because the leaders of these groups don't know anything, and they're just passing on more drivel.
Oh, it's driving me nuts. And I'll see these on Facebook, and I'm following them just out of research, really. And I'm like, I'm like sort of like closing my eyes.
You can't look, but you can't look away.
Oh, and I'm like, they have like 70,000 followers. And I'm like, what are they doing? And so
they are polluting the brains of other women.
They are. And men. And,
and men. Oh my God. Yeah.
They're confused.
I would talk to somebody. My son had a conversation with a woman one time at a party, and she said she was a feminist. And my son said, well, what does that mean? Because, I've trained him well. And she said, well, I think women should have all of the power and men should have none. And he went, so you want us to be in the same situation that you women have been put in for so many centuries?
It's gross.
She goes, yeah, I think that would be fair. And I thought, that felt so repulsive to me.
It's so gross. And this is exactly what I've been reflecting on is like, I'm such a big, supporter of collaboration. Everything that the RW Project and I stand for is collaboration over competition. And that is one of my core principles in everything I do. And, so I'm out there sort of finding people to collaborate with. And I'm seeing these messages over and over again. And it's like, ladies, you're coming from an angry place. You're not coming from a productive place. And
in a place of lacking.
Yes, it's not. Yeah. And this whole women equality thing, it's like, there's so many sound bites that are now, it's so off-putting. And so this is where I want to really, and I'm a force to be reckoned with when I'm passionate about something. So, so I want to be a force on this in, really sort of changing this tide around because it's not productive. It's not healthy. And as a collective well-being, it's just going to drive us further and further apart and we need unity, between the religious issues that we've got going on across the globe. And now it's men and women. It's like, come on, what are we doing here? And I really think this is at the heart of it.
Well, and I think we are so hell bent on taking a side of a situation
Yes.
instead of just being in that situation and looking at it from all sides and really celebrating the differences instead of
Yes.
criticizing them.
Yes.
Because once we can start celebrating, then we can have a party all the time. No.
Absolutely.
Yeah, who doesn't want a bit of
Kristen's
tequila?
life.
Because then I think it just changes the nature of it all. But I think there's just so much fear. And as you noted earlier, like insecurity, that if I tell somebody else that they're amazing and I love what they're doing, that I am somehow giving up what's important to me. Now, and it doesn't work that way. In fact, we all become more powerful. So if I say to you, I love that you are celebrating this female energy, it doesn't take away from me that I celebrate critical thinking.
Yes.
It's just like, isn't this both cool? We got something going on.
Exactly. And you know what? This is another thing. I had seen something, I see this all the time actually. And, this is more on a personal level of, men are now afraid to compliment women. And, I've had this, and it's a similar thought of, the day that I don't get complimented is when I'm going to be upset, actually. And it doesn't mean that because I'm complimented on a physical attribute, of course, in a gentleman manner, the catcalling is not included in this, but,
let's be clear on that.
Yeah, we'll be clear on the respect level of the compliment. But, from a nice place, that doesn't take away from my smarts. It doesn't take away from my perspective. It doesn't take anything away from me. So why are we getting so hell-bent over these things and sterilizing our connections? Everybody's so afraid.
I think it comes back to that whole fear thing, that if I accept a compliment, I'm going to somehow lose some part of myself, instead of I can have this, like, you can believe what you believe and I can believe what I believe, and you can say something nice to me and it doesn't change anything, and I can just say thank you.
Exactly.
Right. And it's such a beautiful, but we're told that it's somehow awful. And I always feel really bad for men when they get in trouble for that sort of thing. If they're being assholes, I'm the one giving them shit. But, they're coming from that really honest, sincere, beautiful place. And then they're getting turned down by it. Like, what sort of insecurities are we creating for them when it happens? And, I heard it happening, a couple weeks ago, and somebody was dissing a guy for saying something nice. And I just went, whoa, hang on a second.
Yes.
He was just being nice to you.
Yes. And that's the shame of it. And, this also comes back to a place of confusion. I think women are so confused about what's acceptable, what's not. They're all stuck in their head. And truthfully, if they step back, they would enjoy it, it's probably, but I think that, there's this like memo going around to women of how to be, you're so independent.
But it's a memo without any clarity on what the memo is actually about. So it's just a bunch of gobbledygook, and you're supposed to somehow decipher what it is without any information. So it goes back to that, define what it means for you first, and then see how your rest of your life aligns with that. Like, I think it's beautiful when a man holds the door open. I hate power locks in a car because I like it when a guy opens my door for me.
I know.
I like it. It doesn't make me less of a woman.
Absolutely not. And even in business, and this is something that I've been really thinking about what my perspective is going to be and how I'm going to put it out there, is when we are, for instance, in the workplace, and this is a bit controversial, I think, what I'm going to say in terms of what, is out there.
Go ahead. Say it
for women empowerment and the gender equality and all this stuff. And it's like, when is anything ever equal? Like, even in a relationship, between a man and a woman, or a woman and a woman, or any intimate relationship, when is it ever really equal? I mean, it's hard to have perfect equality, but so my thing is why are we so focused on anything outside of ourselves? Can we just be focused on what we're bringing to the table and being firm in that, growing your mind, growing your heart, growing your spirit, and from that place just showing up? Because truthfully, when you do that, that's when you're going to get everything that you're worth. And I've really not seen that not happen. I mean, yes, there are issues. We don't need to get into all of that. I'm not trying to make this a platform about that. I'm just saying if we could step back and start going more in that direction, I think we can all come together and that equality will just be a natural, organic flow because everybody will be just focusing on, bringing strength to the table. Instead of focusing on the lacking. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know.
I think it's totally admirable, though, that you're getting behind this with the passion that you have, and then you're creating these events around it. And I love, like, you don't even call your speakers at your events, do you?
Now I call them guest leaders. And I love that because, at first I was like, well, the world's not going to understand that. And then I was like, screw it. I don't care. It feels better to call them. So so let me I had a really great realization in reflecting on how the retreat turned out. And I changed it from guest speakers to guest leaders. And that's because I can't do it by myself. I can't deliver all that I want to deliver on my own. And so, yes, I am the leader of it, but, they're a part of that. And so I also wanted to create an environment where they are there as well, to learn too, that this sort of empowerment world and these events that, we go to, these conferences, we sit in an audience and we look up to these people on a stage. And there's that setup alone creates a disconnection. And it like makes it like less accessible to be on that platform. And I don't mean, to be a speaker, but just talking about a success. And so what really worked very well with my retreat is having the guest leaders a part of the experience as well. And they had a lot to learn from the other people there. And the way I designed it was that, there was no redundancy. Each one has a zone of genius that they contributed. And it became a conversation. More than somebody speaking down to a group of people that have something to learn from them. We all had something to learn from each other. And that was the beauty of it, and that's
the reality of it too. Like, that's so real.
Yeah. And we're all human. And so I want to get away from anything that I'm organizing, and putting together. I want to get away from that feeling of them versus us sort of feeling, and sort of just vibing together and the collective conversation is so much more fruitful than the presentation that you put together to present to a group of people that aren't going to even contribute. And so as a leader, I define a good leader and leadership as engagement. And so that's sort of the point of view that I'm taking with this. And, I think the impact that it can have on somebody that's a few steps behind the guest leaders, it closes that gap, and they can go home feeling like, well, they're my friend now, so, not that.
Well, and I think it also cements learning differently. Like when you're engaged and you're participating, that is totally different than being a passive listener.
Yes.
Because then you go home. Like I got way more out of listening to the people at our table when we were having conversations than I did at the event that I had, because at that event, I was just in the audience being spoken to.
Yes.
And there was no exchange. And I like having that exchange because then I can ask questions or I can have them reframe it in a way that makes more sense to me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's definitely it's a great way for you to be doing this. Most impressive.
And thing is it was my first time doing it. And, when you come from a place of when you're truly aligned with your purpose and you're truly aligned with, what you want, what your values are, and you just sort of surrender to it. And of course it's a hustle. I worked my tail off, but
you did.
when you surrender to that place, you find actually the most difficult things that you're pulling off become the easiest because you're in alignment. And actually, that was the most stunning aspect of this, is that from top to bottom, everything conspired to support it. And how beautifully it all came together, just letting that natural organic flow happen. And actually, on the fly, this is another thing that I really have become passionate about too, is flexibility and being open to being in the moment truly. Even in a structured, I had a timeline, I had every minute accounted for that Saturday in particular, which was, I jam-packed amazing content into, an 8 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. day. And as the leader of that, I allowed for on-the-fly changes to let what was happening organically just flow. And I think with that can work within structure even, like we don't allow for that in in organization, and we as leaders need to be able to do that, because what happened was one of the content pieces was confidence, and the leader that I had was actually Miss Chantal, Chantal Anderson of Call Me Miss, and she had a whole presentation, which was phenomenal, the 7 steps of confidence, but we were engaging on it. We'd kind of go deeper on a point as a collective room. And what that did was it expanded her time. And so I made an on-the-fly change to allow that room. And it actually was one of the more fruitful times that we had.
So then you came from a position also of trust. Like you trusted what your members needed. You trusted your ability to rein it back in. You trusted your speaker. And that's a really special quality. And I don't think that is something that a lot of people can surrender to.
Well, and
which hence the schedule.
Yeah, and that's a process, and this is the thing too. And I'm gonna say this, like, I wasn't born like this, so anybody that's listening, this isn't like, oh, I'm some superhuman that can do these sorts of things. Like, this is over time learning what worked and what didn't work.
You are kind of a superhuman.
Oh, Allison, thank you. No, I mean, listen, there have been times I was a train wreck, and I was not able to trust in those things. And I'm not saying that I'm, anywhere near perfect now with it, but I have come to that place through time. It does take time. And, just sort of being willing to look in, and when things aren't working, like, what is it that you need to heal? Or, I mean, listen, we don't have enough time to go into all of these things, but this is a lot of the stuff that we kind of get into in the retreats that I put together. But, anybody can learn to do these things. You just have to be willing to want to, and yeah. And beyond just the wanting, like, I think it has to move one step further from just wanting something. Absolutely.
It has to move into not being able to live without it.
Yes. And sorry. I always say, like, it's not the question I don't really want to ask is, what do you want? The question is, what are you willing to give everything you have for? Mm-hmm. And that's really the question is, I want a lot of things, but there are a lot of things I won't give up, certain other things to have.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I want to mention too that you did a premiere night, didn't you, with your retreat?
Yes, I was actually.
Yeah, let's do a shout out on that, because those 2 women are amazing.
Yes, the Dream Girl film, they are to blame for my 5-week hustle because I was so inspired. I was so inspired that actually, truthfully, my first event was going to be in September. And when I learned of that film, the Dream Girl film, which honors dreamers, and I've always been a dreamer that felt sort of like the flake, because we live in a world that doesn't honor dreamers. It's like there's something wrong with you if you dream big, if you dream at all. And so I really loved it. I loved their hustle and, all that they had to do to bring it together. And so I became a sponsor of, the premiere. I made it happen somehow. And really honored. I was really honored to be a part of that. And I just love their story. And so that kicked off our weekend, which was pretty incredible. It was a one-time thing that I knew, if I wanted to be a part of that, it had to happen then. So that is why I changed my first retreat from September to June, was
That's
to capitalize.
a bit of a bump up.
You think?
I've planned a lot of events, so I know what goes into them, and that is really impressive.
Yeah, it all came again, like, it was meant to be. And I listened to that ping. Most people would have said, no way, that's not possible. And I just said, it has to be possible because like there's just a calling to it that I felt and I followed it. And sure enough, it was successful, thankfully.
And your soul knows, right?
Yes, your soul does know.
And I think it was really interesting what you had said earlier about, we don't really honor dreamers. And there's such, again, this mixed message, just like with feminism. It's that, you're going to dream big, but you really shouldn't be dreaming. It's
right.
How do you dream big and yet not be a dreamer? And if you're a dreamer, then you're going to get mocked. So now you can't dream big. So how, when people say dream big, do they expect that to happen when they don't allow people to dream?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, whenever, and as a coach or as just a social, as an observer of humanity, the number one question that stumps people the most is like, well, what do you dream about? And people are like so uncomfortable with that, and they don't even allow themselves to dream. And it's because we live in a world that's like, okay, that's great, but what are you really going to do? We feel like that's the number one message we get, that when you dream, so forget about dreaming big. People aren't even imagining. They're not even activating that imagination of what could be possible for them. And I really believe that's why there's a lot of unhappiness in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. I do some talks with youth, and their parents tell them to dream big, but then they don't let them actually follow through. It's like, dream big if you want to be an accountant, or dream big if you want to be a doctor, but don't dream big if you want to be an artist, or don't dream big if you want to travel the world. It's right. There's conditions.
Or dream big, and you can dream big, put that on hold, work your butt off, do this first, and then you can get to it. And it's like, why can't you just get to that?
Right. So is it going to be easier when you're married with kids and a mortgage and health concerns and retirement and all of that? Then you can follow that dream when it's so much harder to leave all of that.
Right. And not only that, but like, if you even make it, God forbid, that's my thing. I was saying this to my parents the other day, is about retirement. We live in this world where we work when we're our strongest and our fittest, and we save for when we're going to be our weakest. Like, why is this, And,
yes.
People kind of look at me like, I took that 2-month trip to Bali and Thailand at, I decided it soon after my 35th birthday. It was something I always wanted to do. And, I did. I felt like eyes were on me. Like, who are you to do that? What? Yeah. Like, and it's like, I can't do what I did, when I'm 60, 70 years old.
Actually, that's funny, because I went for 6 weeks and nobody even questioned it.
Yeah.
Like, people are like, well, of course you're doing that. Like, and I think it's training the people around you as well. There were some people that went, you're going alone? And I'm like, yeah. But it's that, it's always interesting, and you never really know what people's reactions are going to be. And for me, I didn't even hold space for people to not be supportive.
Me neither.
So maybe they were, and I just didn't hear it, because this is what I'm doing. I'm going to Thailand.
Yeah. I didn't care. I was just like, because I knew it's their fear projecting. And but it's interesting. And it, from my perspective, being, a more traveled person than the average, I've traveled solo, is, Americans in particular don't get out enough. This is also a part of my aspect of the events that I create in the retreats, is to encourage that traveling. Like, even though I could pull together a great event in New York, I really wanted to draw people in from out of town, or, to get New Yorkers out of New York, I would, want to bring them somewhere else, because that sense of adventure.
Bring them to Vancouver Island.
Oh yeah, you've got it. Actually, Canada keeps popping up for me. So that's actually been something that I've been thinking about.
And our dollar's really good compared to
I
yours
know.
right now.
I'm like, listen, I need to start going to places where my exchange rate isn't ripping up my money. Yeah. So yeah, no, that's definitely something that I'm looking into is Canada, but a few locations actually. But yeah, we need to get out and see the world, and anytime you do, and I don't mean from a I don't travel like a tourist. I get into places, and maybe it's not for everybody, but I can tell you this, and I just posted a video to my YouTube channel showing a waterfall, adventure on an ATV in the jungles of Thailand. And one of the girls that was there, she was paralyzed in fear. And, at the end of it, she ended up being so grateful that she did it. And so the point is that once you do these things, you're never the same person after it. And I've never seen anybody not grateful for it. Of course, it all comes down to perspective, but
one of the events I used to do got people to do, it was kind of like an amazing race. And one of the challenges was to bungee jumping. And every team member, one person from each team had to do it. And the people were terrified and not one person bailed. There was one person from every team that succeeded in doing it. And they were just so proud of themselves.
Yeah.
And, no one died. It was all great. And they came out the other side stronger and better and more proud.
Oh, yeah. I wouldn't be the woman I am today if it wasn't for my traveling and putting myself in, listen, and I did Bali and Thailand for 2 months by myself, and I didn't really have too much of a plan. It was sort of like I knew where I was going when I got to each place, but there was a lot of room to just figure it out as I was going. But when you confront those fears, you also realize your capacity is so much greater than you realize, and you have to get out of your comfort zone in order to know that. And so that's a lot of what I'm trying to, creating experiences to put people in these positions to naturally come through them on their own is really what I'm about, and why, I'm designing my retreats this way. It's less about telling you what to do and letting you discover on your own what you can do. And what's in there. And that's really going to be the most, I find that to be the best way of transformation. It's not throwing a 5-step list to them. Certainly that helps, but it's the actual
but it's creating that space for them to explore. And if it's not a comfortable space, then they're just going to have lots of resistance, and rightly so. But when you get that proper space, then people feel like they can take those brave steps.
Absolutely. And you know what? We live in this template world, right? Like where there's a one size fits all. And it's like, no, even like the presentations that we put together, I said right up front, like what's meant to resonate with you throughout this whole day is what's going to resonate with you. Not everything has to resonate with you. And I think that we get hard on ourselves if we're not understanding everything all the time. And if not everything fits perfectly, it's like, that's okay. Let it go. That what's meant to hit you is gonna, and when it doesn't, don't worry about it. That's not meant for you. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow it will be, but it's okay. So getting away from the expectations, I think, and sort of getting away from the templates that we're all supposed to fit in, is a huge, it's like my biggest thing in what I put out.
Yeah.
Just letting everybody be authentically themselves, It's all we ever want.
Well, we're almost out of time. So 2 things I want. How do people find you?
KristinGracie.com. That's KristinGracie.com. That's my home base, really. And on Facebook, I'm on social. My social handle is Gracie's Muse. And but my website would be the first place.
Okay, excellent. And with the last couple of minutes, what do you want listeners' takeaway to be? Like, what's your big message? Or not like your big message, but if you have one last final thing to say to the world, what would it be?
Give yourself permission to enjoy your life. You have that right to enjoy it, every bit of what you want. And have fun. Like we talk about all these things that are deep and serious and heavy, but you know what? Make it fun. And that's also a part of my, the stuff that I curate. If it's not fun, what's the point, So give yourself permission to enjoy your life exactly the way you want to.
Very cool. I love it. That is terrific advice. And I just wish we had another hour here to keep
Me
on
too.
talking. I know. We're going to have bring you on again when you're doing your next event.
In September. So I would love to.
Sounds great. Do you know where it is yet?
It's going to be in New York. Yep. At the Hudson Hotel. In New York. It's going to be a similar format, but I'm going to be changing a few things up, and I'm in the midst of creating another kick-ass weekend.
Oh, well, depending on the weekend, I don't know. Sometimes looking pretty busy, but I will do my best to make it because I would love to see you again. I'd love to see what it is that you're building. Be a part of it.
You would love it for sure.
Yes, well, it's in New York. I love everything in New York.
I know. That's
All right.
I have to say that's my secret weapon. It's hard. It's an easy sell, New York.
Oh, yeah, it is hard to say no for the people who love it.
Yeah.
It is my soul's home. I'm sure of it. Anyway, well, thank you so much for taking the time and being on here, and we'll definitely stay in touch.
Thank you, Allison. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. So until next Thursday, speak up because you have something to say, and I want to hear it.
Thanks for hanging out with Natural Born Speakers. But don't stop now. Contact Allison with questions to be a guest or hire her as a speaker. Go to dominothinking.com. See you same place and time next week.